In the summer of 1914, the world stood on the edge of an abyss it didn't yet understand. Europe, a continent of empires and ambition, had been building toward catastrophe for decades. The great powers, Britain, France, Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Russia, were bound by alliances, rivalries, and an arms race that filled their arsenals with the most advanced weapons mankind had ever seen. The spark came on June 28, 1914. In Sarajevo, Bosnia, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, was assassinated by a Serbian nationalist. What might have remained a regional crisis quickly ignited a global inferno. Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. Russia mobilized in defense of its Slavic ally. Germany declared war on Russia, then France. Britain entered the war after Germany invaded neutral Belgium. Within weeks, the world's most powerful nations were locked in what would become known as the Great War. The opening months brought movement and expectation. German armies swept through Belgium, advancing toward Paris. But by September, at the First Battle of the Marne, the French and British halted the German advance. Both sides dug into trenches that stretched hundreds of miles from the North Sea to Switzerland. The war had entered a stalemate, one defined by mud, blood, and unimaginable suffering. Life in the trenches was brutal beyond imagination. Soldiers lived in cold, waterlogged ditches, plagued by rats, lice, and disease. The constant threat of enemy shells and snipers hung over every moment. Between offensives, men waited in grim silence. And when the orders came to go over the top, they charged into a no-man's land littered with barbed wire, craters, and the bodies of the fallen. The battles were massive in scale and devastating in human cost. Verdun, 1916, a clash between French and German forces, raged for 10 months, costing over 700,000 casualties for a few miles of ground. The Somme, launched by the Allies to relieve pressure on Verdun, saw over 1 million killed or wounded. Machine guns, artillery barrages, poison gas, and new weapons like the tank turned the battlefield into a mechanized slaughterhouse. This was not just a European war. The Ottoman Empire joined on the side of the Central Powers, opening new fronts in the Middle East. The Gallipoli campaign in 1915 saw Allied forces, including Australians and New Zealanders, attempt to seize control of the Dardanelles, a campaign that ended in disaster. On the Eastern Front, vast battles between Russia and Germany saw entire armies destroyed, while in Africa and Asia, colonial troops fought in distant campaigns. The seas, too, became a battleground. German U-boats prowled the Atlantic, sinking merchant ships and drawing neutral nations into the conflict. The most infamous of these attacks came in 1915 when the Lusitania, a British passenger liner, was sunk, killing nearly 1,200 people, including Americans. In 1917, the war shifted dramatically. Russia, exhausted and facing revolution at home, withdrew from the fight, signing the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk with Germany. But that same year, the United States entered the war after years of trying to remain neutral. Fresh American troops and supplies tipped the balance in favor of the Allies. By 1918, German forces launched a desperate offensive to break the stalemate before American reinforcements arrived in full force. They pushed deep into Allied lines, but the counterattacks, supported by tanks, coordinated infantry, and relentless artillery, drove them back. On November 11, 1918, at the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, the guns fell silent. The Great War was over. The human cost was staggering. Over 16 million dead and 20 million wounded. Entire cities lay in ruins and generations were scarred. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, placed heavy blame and reparations on Germany. While it ended the fighting, it also sowed the seeds of resentment and instability that would lead to another, even greater war just 2 decades later. World War I changed the world in ways no one could have imagined. Empires collapsed. Austria-Hungary, the Ottoman Empire, Germany's Kaiserreich, and Russia's Tsarist regime all fell. New nations were born, borders redrawn, and a new world order emerged. It was a war that introduced industrialized killing, reshaped societies, and altered the course of history forever. And yet, amid the devastation, there were also stories of resilience, of soldiers who held the line against impossible odds, of nurses who risked their lives to save the wounded, and of ordinary people who endured years of hardship with quiet courage. The Great War was meant to be the war to end all wars. Instead, it became a grim warning, a reminder of how quickly pride, ambition, and fear can set the world aflame, and how dearly peace must be guarded.